and I ended up with literally bubbles being shot into my armpit while I was trying to take photos. I'm trying to hold the pose while I'm like, that's really cold and slimy and ew. Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
Well, last night was an interesting night. It was a lot of fun. So it's still
totally
Fantasy
believable.
Fest. Yeah, it's still Fantasy Fest here, and it was kind of funny because last night was one of the big events, which is the headdress ball, where people kind of decorate these big headdresses, and it's like it can be supported by the shoulders, but it has to be worn on the head. And some of the creations that people create are pretty impressive. And the very gay mothers were asked to kind of greet and be a part of the selfie station that they had. And it was like one of the first events where Serena hasn't been present, so it was kind of funny. But one of our other fellow fairies joined, who is a good friend who is in drag, who is significantly taller than I am. And it was so funny. At one point, somebody said, oh no, I want the big fairy too. And I was like, oh, with him, I get to be the little fairy. Normally, I'm the big fairy when Serena's around because she's pint size, fun size. So yeah, I was like, oh, I get to be the small fairy, which is kind of fun.
If it wasn't for the wings and the glitter, and because I'm short, like things come from below. And so all of a sudden you get confetti or bubbles that come out of nowhere. It's like, I feel like sometimes they see you like walk straight towards, and then they're like, wait, there's another fairy. And I'm like, hey.
Well, and I was telling Serena earlier, we were doing a lot of people wanted us to be in the photo with them at the selfie station. And we had our bubble with these bubble guns that we use to kind of produce bubbles on, surprisingly. And unfortunately, one of them broke last night. I'm going to see if I can fix it or not. But when we both had them, I was saying because we're trying to introduce new people to how you fairy, because it's like there is a technique to it, believe it or not. I mean, I'm not sure that many people would understand this.
Open
there are certain
Fairy
things
Academy.
Yeah. Well, it's like you have to be like mindful with the bubbles. Like you can't be too obnoxious with them. You have to kind of like pump them like intermittently rather than just like blast them, because we've had people step in before and it's like there's bubbles everywhere and then slippery floors and all kinds of things, and people are like, I need a face full of bubbles. And one of the things I was saying is like when you do a photo, put the bubble guns behind and blow the bubbles, and it kind of creates this nice bubble effect. Well, and he put his hand behind the person who we were in the photo with, didn't realize he hadn't put it behind me, and I ended up with literally bubbles being shot into my armpit while I was trying to take photos. I'm trying to hold the pose while I'm like, that's really cold and slimy and ew. So yeah, it was definitely a fun night. It was all a lot of friends. It was good, but it was I've never had a bubble gun shot into my armpit before. I mean, who knew
that will happen when you're ferrying?
Right. And kind of, I you know, what's really funny is I almost feel a little bit like that sentence kind of leads kind of neatly onto what we're talking about today, because in other circumstances, it could be perceived as just that thing. So today we are talking about word salad and how word salad is used. It is not a yummy salad. There are way yummier salads out there, far more delicious. And how word salad, when utilized either intentionally or unintentionally, can actually compromise the needs of the people listening, the need of the people who are engaging with it. And like, do you want to kind of give a little bit of because like this came from a conversation that you'd had recently about, like, because not everybody knows what word salad is. And it's funny, like I knew about word salad long before it was a more commonly used term, because there was a TV show I used to watch called Boston Legal. And there was an episode where one of the characters was under a lot of stress and started, like, he thought he was talking normally and he was engaging in word salad. So if you don't know what word salad is basically where you're saying a bunch of words, but they don't actually make any sense. And there's different variations of it. Like the Boston Legal example was like, it was just like he's giving a talk in court and it's like fish, banana, porcupine. Like, and it's like that kind of thing where it's like, it's just complete and utter nonsense. And then there is another form of word salad where it sounds like you're saying something, but in actual fact, you're not really saying anything. And that's kind of the more problematic of the two. But I remember that I don't know why that was one of those things that kind of stuck with me from all those years back. But now it's become more kind of common vernacular for us because we talk about it pretty much on the regular. And we sometimes forget that other people are like, wait, did you say word salad? What the hell is that?
Yeah, and I actually didn't know what it was until Claire, interesting. I used to watch Boston Legal too with my aunt. Like that was her show. And so I was like, I actually think I know what you're talking about. And then it became part of my like it happens a lot more than you'd think. But once you're aware of it, you're like, you are saying nothing of any sort of like substance, are you?
Yeah.
Like I hear you and I actually hear what you're saying and it's nothing. Like it's nothing.
Yes.
Do you have something? Do you have like a thought that you wanted to put in or?
Well, and it was like, and I think that's, I mean, we're going to get into this more later, but that whole, like, if it's really obvious that there is not, it's total nonsense. The like none of the words have any connection to the other words that are coming out. It's obvious that there's something not quite right with the situation. So you're not trying to understand it. But I think the dangerous or the more problematic side of it is when it sounds like there is something that is actually being communicated using these words. It sounds like and often it sounds like it's something important, like it's something like, I should be understanding this, I need to understand this. And so, and the fact that you then like, so you end up like trying to understand it and like you almost get even more lost because you're like, I'm not following. This doesn't make any sense to me. But you assume because of the confidence and authority with which it's normally being spoken that the issue is with you, not with the person communicating. And that's where it's a very, very unnerving experience to experience it when you don't understand what this content. It's almost like a verbal gaslighting.
I was just out of my head, like took the words right out of my head.
And if you don't know what gaslighting is a term that was based on a movie in the 1940s where in it somebody acts to basically have somebody else question their memory, their understanding of reality, their perspective. So for example, like this woman gets a bracelet from a guy and she says and he's like, well, you lose things all the time, so you should make sure it's somewhere safe. And she's like, I don't lose things all the time. So she puts it in her little purse and she's like, I'll put it in here so I won't wear it, but I'll put it in here so it's safe. And then it goes missing and she's like, oh, well, I must lose. Obviously I do lose things because and it turns out he stole it, and he stole it to have her questioning her sanity, basically. And gaslighting can sometimes be intentional. It can be unintentional, but it's like where you, like if somebody says, something happened, something happened. And somebody said, no, that's not what happened. Even though that is what happened, that's a form of gaslighting. And there's lots of different ways, but this kind of like verbal gaslighting is like, I'm saying something that sounds like it's making sense, and therefore I'm acting like it's making sense. So you're also believing that it should be making sense, but your perspective on it is like, I'm sorry, I thought I'd turn the notifications.
I watched her turn it off.
I'm actually going to go ahead and make sure I'm going to turn it off again. I'm going to turn off a different function to try and make sure that sound doesn't happen again. But yeah, so basically what you're doing, and so the whole, like, sometimes you're not telling somebody something isn't true. You're acting in a way that has them convinced that there's something wrong with them, that there's something wrong with what they're understanding, that they're confused, they're not understanding things correctly. And that's what this kind of word salad can be, where it's like, I'm saying things that sound like they make sense in such a way that it's obvious that I believe that I'm saying something that makes sense. So when you're over here going, I don't get it. Oh, there's something wrong with, I must be misunderstanding something. I must not be getting something. And that's where
I
that
must
kind
have
of
to
verbal
pay this
gaslighting comes in.
person to
Yeah.
make me understand.
Yeah. So back over to you while I try and make sure that jingling doesn't happen again.
So what happened that brought this kind of topic up is my husband and I were sitting in a business class together, and there was a presenter on video for this business class. And immediately, knowing the needs as I do, there was just not a connection between me and this person. Immediately, I was off put by how they were speaking. Like, it was kind of the condescending tone, and I know better, and some of the language she was using was just inappropriate. But that's besides the point. So I had a demeanor to me that was just kind of like, I'm here, I'm going to take what I can from this, and a lot of this is going to go in one ear and out the other. And so I'm sitting there, and at one point my husband turns to me and he whispers, he goes, how can somebody say so much but not actually be saying anything at all? I was like, word salad. And he was like, what? And I'm like, word salad. He goes, what's that? I was like, a bunch of words that are thrown together to create something that looks like a salad, but it's really just shit thrown in a bowl.
Like, it's more, I mean, let's put it into like out of the metaphor, like it's a bunch of words that are thrown together to make it seem like they're supposed to communicate something, when actually nothing is being communicated, because how the words, the meaning of the words and how they're positioned means that they're not making any coherent sense or anything of substance.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because Joe had never heard of it. And then he's like, oh, I guess that makes sense. And I was having a conversation with some people last night that are also part of this class. And they said something of a similar effect. And so I said the same thing. And Joe actually said it at the same time. We're like, word salad. And so, well, what is that? And so we were explaining it. And they hadn't heard of it before, but you could tell they were like, that's what's
that
happening.
makes sense. Yeah.
So we were in the class this morning, and I get a text message through, and it just says word salad. And I'm like, now they're starting to see it. And it's interesting because once you're aware of the fact that word salad is a thing and kind of how it works, and the intention that some people can have with it, because sometimes it is unconscious, it isn't an intentional thing, it could be a reaction to being stressed out or whatnot, but there's another
element. Could be something that they're subconsciously doing to try to meet their needs without realizing they're doing it to meet their needs. So there's the I'm doing this like for there's no reason for it. There's the, I'm doing this there's a reason I'm doing this, and subconsciously it's because I'm trying to get my needs met, but I don't realize that's what I'm doing. And then there's the conscious intentional, I'm doing this to try to meet my well, not necessarily I'm doing this to try to meet my needs. I'm doing this to achieve this outcome. And that outcome is basically I'm trying to get my needs met. So there's kind of different versions of it. And depending on the version, can depend on which needs are being impacted, or both in the person receiving it and also the person who's speaking it too.
Yeah, I was going to say it also depends on what needs are up at that time, because if if your needs are unmet, you might be affected more by word salad and not even realize it. When my needs are met, I pick up word salad right away. I'm like, okay, I'll listen, but sometimes I don't. Like, and that's the thing, right? Like, you pick and choose. But it's interesting, and I kind of, I hope I get to hear how people are now able to utilize, like the people I was talking to and my husband, like, are they going to start noticing it more? Because I notice it. I notice it a lot now. I notice it in entertainment. I notice it in sales. I notice it in just general conversation. I'm like,
right.
Okay. Like,
so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of break this into 3 sections. So we're going to first talk about when somebody is doing this as a subconscious attempt to try to get needs met. And the truth of the matter is, you never really know whether someone is doing it unintentionally or intentionally. You can kind of get a gist, like where you can kind of get a sense from their energy and how their demeanor is as to whether it's intentional or not, but you're never really sure. But so there's the unintentional. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the intentional and why people do this and what the purpose is of doing this. Because I can imagine people being like, well, what's the point? Like, there is a point. There's a couple of points actually, and we'll get to that. And then what we'll do is we're actually going to finish off by looking at something that's kind of adjacent to this, but is using a lot of the same strategies as the second version that we're talking about, where we're going to look at jargon and how jargon is often used in a very similar way to the way that word salad is used. And actually, I think that jargon is more normalized to be used in this way. And so we want to kind of tie these together because they're all very similar in terms of how, why, and what's the point kind of thing. So the first version of this is, as I said, somebody who we don't necessarily think is intentionally trying to manipulate other people by using word salad, but subconsciously they're probably doing the things that they're doing to try to get certain needs met. And I think that kind of summarizes the experience that you've had recently, right? With the that's the version of it that you've been exposed to, right, with your husband and these other people, and that's kind of the reason we wanted to talk about that first. Like, when you noticed it happening, what did you notice, and when you start, like, drop that needs lens on, which almost happens automatically for us, it's almost like we don't need to put the needs lens on, it just is there. Like, what was your understanding of the needs perspective on what was going on?
Well, with what actually happened, I believe it was 100% conscious. I think that it was targeted. Like, the business class was taught by a lawyer and tax accountant. So, like, right there, I'm like, okay, you're going to say a lot of things that are they'll either land or they won't, just because those are some specialized fields.
Right.
And the way that things were communicated, there was, like, I hate when people say dumb it down, but like know your audience.
Well,
And
I mean, if you're trying to communicate, you need to communicate to.
it's just going to be the sound effect.
I'm going to go and unplug the thing from the wall. That's what I'm going to do. I'll be right back. Okay, so the jingle machine has been unplugged. Hopefully, we will not be having any more jingling at this end.
If it does happen, that's going to be one of those creepy episodes where.
I mean, the fairy magic is varying. Like, the fairies are varying today, apparently. Who knew? So anyway, so to get back to what Serena was just saying, is that Serena was just talking about the fact that there was the dynamic in the room, the individual involved, that there was that you believe that there was a conscious attempt to influence or manipulate people in the room, correct?
Yes, I do believe that, like, this person knew by speaking the way they did, it would make people feel like they didn't know what they were talking about, that they absolutely needed him, that, like, this was the most important thing you were going to hear all day.
So there's a difference between it's going to be the most important thing you're going to hear all day, and there's a deliberate, a conscious attempt to kind of try to influence and manipulate. My curiosity is that in this setting, whether he knew he was using word salad, and word salad was a tool that was being deliberately, consciously used as a form of manipulation in that situation. And based on my previous experience, a lot of the time, I don't think that people in these situations, they know they're trying to position themselves as the expert. They know they're trying to make everybody in the room feel like they don't know what they're talking about, and that they do know what they, as in the people in the room don't know what they're talking about, and the person on stage does know what they're talking about. In that situation, and it's based on the individual, sometimes they don't even realize they're doing word salad, because a lot of the time they're up there. And what's the reason the word salad is happening is because they're still trying to present this expert facade, shall we say. Their brain is thinking about something else than what their mouth is saying. Their brain is thinking, oh, I've got to get the sale. I've got to try and get these people in. And the word salad comes because they're talking while their brain is not paying any attention to what they're saying. And the kind of words and phrases they're using are to position themselves as an expert. But it's not, I'm trying to say something that doesn't make any sense at this point, because honestly, I think in that situation, it would make more sense for him to be positioning himself as an expert and speaking at such a high level that's beyond the comprehension of people in the room. Like, I know I could walk into any room and talk about needs in a way that what we were just saying before we kind of had to break for the jingle machine, is that if you're trying to communicate effectively, you communicate to the lowest common understanding in the room. Because if you want to communicate effectively, you need to communicate in a way that everybody in the room will understand. If you're trying to position yourself as an expert and basically make everybody in the room feel inadequate so that they will buy your services, actually the most effective way of doing that is not to word salad it, but actually to speak. It's like if you were talking about PhD particle physics to a room full of kindergartners and you were talking at the PhD particle physics level, the kindergartners are going to be like, there's like, I don't know whether you've seen it. There's a viral video that does the rounds every now and again where there's like a man in a truck and he's going, here's where your gears are. This is first, second, third, fourth. Here's where your gas. Here's where the key goes in. Here's the brake. And then it pans. And this is little toddler in the front seat, like behind the wheel going like that. And it's kind of like that. If you really want to position yourself as an expert, that's where people try to utilize their knowledge, utilize jargon, which we'll get to in the end. But I think a lot of the time, the reason the word salad is happening is because they're not really paying attention to what they're saying. They're just trying to sound like they're talking and saying something important while their brain is going, must get the sale. How many people in here do I think I can convert? How many people can afford this? Where, like, that's what they're thinking. And I think that's a lot of the time the word salad ends up happening. Does that resonate?
I think, yeah, I would think so. Like, I mean, there could be an element.
It's hard to say without
is,
seeing it. Yeah,
exactly. And even seeing it, I mean, there are certain things that seem very like that was really strategic,
deliberate.
But did he realize he was basically speaking?
Nonsense.
I'm not going to say nonsense because like the stuff connected, like it all went together, but it's like you could have said that in 5 words, but you just took an hour of our time to say the same thing 15 different ways with 20 different terms that mean like go, or you know what I mean? And that's kind of like,
yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that a lot of the time is that you end up with a lot of sentences that sound coherent, but they are actually nonsense. But what ends up happening is that if you take an hour to say something that you could have said in like 5 sentences or 5 words, what ends up happening is that in that hour, there's a lot of filler sentences that are nonsense. And then every now and again, there's maybe one sentence that is, oh, that made sense. And it's almost like, well, because I've understood that sentence, I must be why am I not understanding? There's something wrong with me that I'm not understanding the rest of the sentences. And that's where the word salad tends to come in. It's like the word salad is like, it's like a filler to try and eke out the time, to make sure that if I'm on stage and I'm speaking for an hour, I'm giving more value than I would be if I was speaking for 5 minutes. No, what's valuable is if you can say something in 5 words that someone can understand, absorb, and retain. That's far more valuable than somebody who speaks for an hour and doesn't really say a huge amount. Makes sense?
Yeah, and when you realize that you've sat there and it's like, that was a creative way to say that many times in that many different ways. And
yes,
like, because like I said, it was a class. I tried to take what I could out of it, and there were definitely like these little nuggets. But I think that's when you're like those little nuggets. Sometimes it's something that just kind of resonates with you. Like it's not always the information like that's necessarily being placed there. But I tend to find
of why you're there.
Exactly, and I tend to find that especially in educational situations, there is a lot of word salad filler that's just like, I would have understood this so much more if I wasn't trying to navigate past carrots and tomatoes and cucumbers. I just asked for spinach. Like, let's keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is that when you're in that situation, you spend so much time trying to understand the nonsensical pieces. And especially like, and I think this is something that it's like, especially if you're neurodivergent, like as somebody who has ADHD, like if somebody says something that I don't understand, I got to figure that out, because otherwise my brain is going to spend half of its energy trying to figure out the thing I didn't understand. So it means I can't really focus on the rest of it. So there are different people who process information differently that are actually more susceptible to this than others, because some other people might just be like, oh, didn't get that bit, move on. Like, and I'm like, my brain's like, no, what's that? What did they say? What did that mean? That may be important. That could be the whole point of this entire thing. And in actual fact, it's not. Just being really honest.
And that might be why I'm so susceptible to see it, and not just the needs work, but also my ADHD. Like Claire said, if I can't if something doesn't make sense, I'm trying to connect all the dots. Like, cause I'm like, well, I'm listening to this presentation. There's obviously like a map to follow with it. Oh no, no, there isn't.
Absolutely. So when you're talking about this, like, let's assume for the sake of argument here, that this person wasn't like intentionally like, I'm going to not make sense here to confuse the people in the audience. Like, let's assume that it was like an unconscious thing that was caused by a bunch of different circumstances. But there's a subconscious reason behind this. And the subconscious reason underneath this is that, and I said, it could be, and this person may fall into category 2, which we're going to get to in a second anyway. So like it will cover both sides of it. A lot of the time, what they're doing in this situation is they're trying to meet their value need, i.e. they're trying to position themselves as more valuable in the space so that people will trust them, i.e. they'll get their security need met. People will believe them. People will feel connected to them. So love and connection need, and people are more likely to buy from them. So what they're doing is they're trying to bolster their value need to be seen as superior to somebody else. Now, the second you hear this, if you were a regular listener to the podcast, you know, as soon as there's a superiority dynamic, you know that the person who is at the kind of lower level is having their needs compromised because they're being devalued by comparison. That's like you're trying to get your value need met by this comparative thing. And in doing so, because of the interconnectedness, you're actually compromising the needs of the person who's trying to be perceived as superior. So like it's costing everybody's needs in the process. It's not actually going to benefit anybody in this situation. And what they're probably also trying to do is they're trying to meet their own security need and their own foundation function need if they're trying to do that to try and get sales. So it's like, I'm trying to get this is where my business is. This is where my income is coming from. So I'm going to use that. Like, that's a way of like getting my foundation function need. We need money to be able to function and pay rent and buy groceries and all that kind of stuff. But also our ability to financially support ourselves is linked to our security need. So like this person is trying to get their needs met. The challenge is with this situation, and these situations, it's very common, is that a lot of the time they're trying to get those needs met at the cost of somebody else's needs. Like, this is what often happens in these sales dynamics where it's like I have to convince you that you need me, and then I'm going to charge you sometimes something that is not in alignment with the value of what is actually being offered. But I'm going to try and convince you of this thing so that you can meet my need to have money, i.e. my foundation function and security need. And the problem with doing that is that it means that you are, again, positioning your needs as being superior to the other person's needs. It's like, I don't care how I negatively impact somebody else's needs. What if somebody else can't financially afford it? And I have been to, I mean, we're talking about obviously an educational setting here. I cannot tell you the number of workshops, seminars, conferences, events that I have been to where I have watched this dynamic play out over and over and over again. And they don't care whether what they are offering is of value to the people in the seats. They don't care whether the people in the seats can afford the thing. And what they do is they position it like, oh, you can't afford this, but you can't afford not to, because obviously I know about this and you don't. And that's how it's being positioned. So what they're doing is they're getting somebody else to compromise their needs to try to get their own needs met. And this is the reason we talked about this. I don't know whether it was the last episode or maybe a couple before, where we talked about our own sales process. You won't ever, like, one of the first things I say to somebody is, if your financial needs are not at a level where you can afford working with us, don't work with us. Period. There are free, and that's why we're doing the things to make work more accessible, and we're providing these free resources like the podcast and the videos and the social media and all that kind of stuff, is because if you try and compromise your financial needs to try to learn how to meet your needs, you're undermining the entire process from the beginning. It's really easy. And for us, like, if we're trying to get our needs met for foundation function and security by compromising somebody else's needs, by getting them to give us money that they can't afford to give,
the whole process falls apart.
We know that doesn't work. It doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for them. And it's really fucked up. Like, so, but this dynamic happens. And then what you end up doing is sometimes you get that, I'm the expert. You need what I do. You need to, because I understand this and you don't understand this. And so you can't afford not to have me. And then you add pressure to that situation as well. And that's when it's like, there's a limited offer deal. You have to sign up today. You don't get time to think about it. And all of that is further red spectruming the way that the person who is trying to get their needs met by getting the sale is compromise, because they're compromising these other people's needs more and more, because what they're doing is they're removing their personal power need. I don't have a choice, because I can't afford this anyway. So I have to get it the best possible deal. And if I have to get it, I have to get it today. So I don't have the choice to go away and think about it and still get offered the same offer in terms of what the sale and the price and the package is. That's the reason we always say to people, if you come and work for us, if you work for us, if you want to come and work with us, I mean, you come work for us, that's a different conversation. If you want to come and work with us, we want to make sure you have time. So you are engaging your personal power need by being able to make a choice and being able to make a conscious choice that feels right for you. So it's like, and that's where all of these, like a lot of these sales strategies are actually ways of further compromising the needs of the person you are selling to try and bolster the needs of the person who's doing the selling. That's the reason people, like a lot of times sales people have this kind of like sleazy reputation, because you might not know, oh, you're trying to get this need met. You're trying to meet this need by doing this, this, and this. So I can see this and this. You might not see the inner workings of it, but you can feel it. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the room with somebody who is pulling this shit, you can normally feel it. Like, this just feels crappy. Like, I don't know why. I don't know what it is, but there's something about this that feels off.
I just made a note. One thing that I think is important to say, like this person, they believe what they're saying. They believe they're helping. They believe they want to help. Like that's I'm gonna go with the most positive thinking I can on this. This person is here to help the students. Whether, like there's
so yes, and so there's nuance in this. They may be telling themselves a story that they want to help, but what they're not doing is doing that help in alignment with not negatively impacting the other people. And that's the thing, is that, oh, but I'm trying to help, becomes the justification for compromising somebody else's needs. And I absolutely agree. And a lot of the time we have to have that in that situation. The person in that position has to have that, but I'm trying to help these people. I know better than they do, because that's the self-image that allows them to feel like they're in integrity and allows them to sleep at night. When in actual fact, they're not looking at, where am I negatively impacting the people in the space? And that is as much like, it's like saying to somebody, I've run over you with my car, but I'm giving you a Band-Aid, so I'm helping. But, well, yeah, okay, you might have helped me this amount, but actually you've cost me this amount. So when you add it up, the net benefit is a deficit.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that kind of goes along with that, good thing I wrote both elements in my notes, because there it went. Apparently thought about writing both, but the note that I took really has no trigger as to what it was. With that kind of you can't afford not to do this. That could be a true statement, but when the actual cost of doing what you're offering, let's just say, these are not real numbers, is $100, but you're going to charge $1,500 for your services, knowing that the people that you are helping are likely not in that position to be able to do that
to
without
afford that.
Yeah, or just to be like, oh, okay, that's what it costs. It's like, yeah, you can't afford not to do this. And
I got to jump in on this, because I think that is a vicious sales tactic, because I think that it's untrue at times. You can afford not to do this because the cost of doing it would be higher than the cost of not doing it. So it's like, yes, if you could afford this, yes, you can't afford not to do it because you need the benefit of it more than you have the money. But it's like, let's put it into like monetary terms. So say somebody is they've got $20 in their bank account. Oh, no, so they've got $50 in their bank account. And this thing that somebody is being offered to them is like $45. Like, that feels like a push, because that's almost all of my bank account. But in actual fact, if I'm going to spend $45 and that's going to get me to the point where I can earn $4,000, yeah, it might be a little bit edgy. It might feel a little uncomfortable. Our security need might fire off. Our foundation function need might fire off, because we're getting close to the line. In that situation, yes, it's true. It may be true that you can't afford not to do that, because you're going to drain that $50 and not have any benefit on it. But whereas if you spent the $45, you might be able to get the benefit. Now, and this is spending $45 that is not attributed to anything else essential. So it's like that $50 isn't going to pay rent. It's not going to cover your food and all that sort of thing. Now, if, however, you had that $50 in your bank account, but you needed that $50 to pay rent, to make your groceries, it would be more costly to you to invest that $50 or $45 in this thing. I think that the cost of doing that and not being able to pay rent and becoming houseless, or not being able to eat and not being able to function as meet your foundation functioning, the cost of that would be higher than not having that $45 thing, whatever it is. And I think this is the thing, is that we've got so used to that phrase, you can't afford not to do it, that we just accept it to be true. But if somebody is in a different financial position, actually, not only can they afford not to do it, they must afford not to do it, because that money is attributed somewhere else, or it's going to put them in such a deficit that they're going to end up, like, if they end up with a loan with exorbitant interest. Like we had it in, there were things in the UK called payday lenders. That were based, so where it's like, okay, we're going to give you a certain amount of money to get through to your payday, but then the interest charged on that money was so high, you were never going to get out of that cycle, because you were never going to earn enough to be able to pay it off. And so it's like, this is where I'm like, yes, and nuance. Like if you're a diabetic and you need that $50 to buy your insulin, fuck yeah, you can afford not to do it, because you have to have that insulin. And there's no point having this thing that could earn you a bunch of money if you are ceasing to exist because you haven't had the medication that's going to keep you alive. So I think yes, and
yeah, I definitely agree on that. Where I was kind of going with it was more like, I'm helping you and I'm graciously offering these services, but when the deviation, the discrepancy
between the two
is what, like, that's really where it gets slimy for me. I'm like,
I agree. Yes to what you're saying. What I was saying is that there are a couple of moments where you said it's true, you can't afford not to do this, and I'm saying there are situations in which it's not true that you can't afford not to do this.
Even the $100 to the
is too much.
Yeah.
It's more than someone can afford without putting themselves at such a detriment that actually it's going to be compromising their physical well-being, the future of their business, their health, their like existence kind of thing. And yes, what you were saying is that what I understood you were saying is that if it costs you a certain amount to do it, and you basically charge 100 times that, and the person can't afford 100 times that, but they could have potentially afforded maybe double it, then that's the point where it's like, you're saying you're helping, but you're really helping yourself here. You're not actually looking at the holistic view of like, where is this person at, and can this person afford this? There's a reason that we have an option when someone comes to work with us, that is, they can pay a certain amount every week that is in alignment with whatever their budget is. And then once they've accrued enough to have a session, they can have a session at that point, so that you don't have to put yourself in a financial deficit to be able to begin doing this work, kind of thing. And I think you're right. I think it's another level of slimy. I just wanted to make sure I address that you can't afford not to do it, because I don't think it's always true.
I retract the absoluteness yes of it. And yeah, like, it's sometimes I feel like it, being in business, it's hard because we've been conditioned the way we have, like, to be like, all right, I want to make money, that's why I have a business, when there might be other aspects to
spend money
it,
to
like,
make money, and all those little phrases, and which is not necessarily untrue, but sometimes you don't have money to spend, in which case you can sometimes find other ways of making money. You don't have to do it that way. There are other ways, and sometimes it's harder and it takes more effort and time and all that sort of stuff. But
it's
you're
remembering the interconnectedness in like business, like, there is like with what we do, there is a lot of time and labor and a lot of stuff that's behind the scenes that you don't see. And there's a lot of businesses like that. When you see face value, it's like, oh, I just paid $250 for this sheet of paper. It's like, well, I have plenty of paper at home. Why did I have to pay for this? And
absolutely,
like, there is,
and it's understanding what the value is of something.
Exactly. And I feel like in this situation, the value that you get, the value that was being promoted, and the value that
the cost,
it actually
would actually be,
are
horribly
three
out of whack.
totally different things.
Mhm.
And that's when those three things that should really be in total alignment are so far out of alignment. Like that's when it's like when you feel that there's a cavern between
Yes.
anything in business. Like
Or
that's
chasm.
when it's
I mean, there could be a cavern as well.
either way, a big hole. But if
Yeah.
you're feeling that hole, it's a good idea to step away from the ledge and be like, okay, where is this? Oh, wait, there's a hole here, but if I just move down here, like it's actually not like this is the way I should go so that I can cross over. Like
absolutely.
it's definitely
Yeah.
like a stopping point for me now. If I feel that kind of like,
Mm.
it's a big jump there. I'm like, okay, why is it a big jump? And I
Right.
usually
And,
kind of
like,
get to the answer.
and I mean, a lot of the time, like if you want to work one-on-one with us, it's not cheap to work one-on-one with us and to get access to me, because you're not just paying for that hour of my time, you're paying for all of the expertise that I have gathered over this. I mean, and Serena will, I mean, it's ironic. There was something you were saying earlier and I can't remember what it was, but it triggered me to think of this, where I think you were talking about like business and education and how there was like a little nugget here and a little nugget there. Like it reminds me of the story that Serena tells about when she did therapy. Like she did therapy for 10 years and she maybe got a half a dozen nuggets in that entire 10-year period. And when she worked with me one-on-one, she was getting multiple nuggets every single session that we sat together. And so that's the thing, is like, you're not just paying for that time, you're paying for the ability that I can join the dots in the way that nobody else can when it comes to needs. And if you can't afford that, then there's versions of this which means that it's more affordable, but you get less of the access to that insight that I can provide, because that's something that comes at a premium, because I've been doing this work for like 14 years and I've been doing all the research and all the studying and all the behind the scenes, and all of that stuff is part of that process. And so that's a reason, like if you compare what we charge to somebody who is just, they've maybe done a couple of hours training course, you're not going to be looking at the same thing, but there's a value associated with that. The key thing here is, and I think this is the thing that I have the issue with people, of like the description of what you were just talking about, is that we're at the, okay, yes, it's a premium if you want to work with me one-on-one and you want me to be able to join the dots for you. But also there's going to be a middle, once the program is finished, there'll be a middle ground where it's like you get a little bit of access to me, but maybe not quite so much. And then there's another one where you don't maybe get as like direct interactive access to me, but you'll still get access to the content and the knowledge and the insights. And then you've got the podcast and things like that, which are completely free. So you're still getting access to some of the insights and the wisdom that will benefit you. And it's so important that you pick whichever version of that is in alignment with where your needs are. And the same thing, like I think, and that's the problem, is I think with a lot of these situations where you have these educational setups, is where you have somebody, and because they want the sale and the objective for them is the sale, not necessarily making sure you get the right thing for you, there's a pressure and you end up having your needs compromised to try to meet their needs, which is where it all gets very out of whack and kind of icky and ew.
Yeah, that's the feeling I had during it. I was like, ew.
Yeah, I've had multiple ews over my lifetime. So let's now look at the second option, the second version of this. So the second version of this is where this is not something where, so the previous version, we're using word salad, but we're not trying to actively confuse the people in the audience. We are, for a number of circumstances, we're trying to, there's a subconscious like pressure to, I've got to get the sale, I've got to get this, I've got to do this. And so it's causing us to create this kind of word salady environment, or I've got to be perceived as valuable. And the only way I get perceived as valuable is if I talk for an hour on this. I've only got 5 minutes of content on that. So I'm going to have a bunch of word salad that's going to make up the other 55 minutes of this session. So a lot of that is like, there's a subconscious unmet needs that are pulling the strings underneath the surface. And we're not necessarily intentionally, sorry, someone got caught in my throat there, intentionally trying to use word salad to manipulate the people in front of us. The second option is somebody who understands word salad, who knows what it is for, and is intentionally using this to try to gaslight, to try to influence, or try to manipulate the people who they are talking to. And this can happen on a one-to-one level. It can also happen in a like a educational setting, like Serena was just talking about. A big one this shows up in is a lot of the cult dynamics, where cult leaders will often use this like word salad strategy to try to make themselves seem like they know everything and have the people who are following them feel like they really don't know anything. So they have to stay around this person to understand, because they need to understand, because that's the point of why they're there, is to achieve enlightenment or whatever the purpose is of said culty group. But it's not just in those situations. Like a lot of the time what's happening in these situations is that, yes, there is a little bit of a value need thing where it's like, I need to position myself as valuable, and these people need to see themselves as invaluable so that they want to hang around me to be able to gain the knowledge from me that they can then become valuable as well. Which is ironic, because they're going to continue saying word salad, which means you will never actually get the knowledge, because there's not really any knowledge to get, because they're not actually saying anything of any substance. All that to like momentarily to one side. But what ends up happening is that they're trying to devalue the people, and they're trying to increase this value. So they're trying to get their value need met at the cost of somebody else's, but also they're trying to create a dependency on them for these people getting their needs met. Now, whether that need is security, whether that need is love and connection, whether that need is value, whether that need is power, personal power, whether that need is growth, doesn't matter what the need is. They're trying to create a dependency, because if they know, if they are dependent on if their followers or the people in the audience are dependent on them, they're not going anywhere. And that dependency, if you don't have other ways of meeting those needs, can create this dynamic where it's like, I'll give anything because I need what this person has to give me. And this is where a lot of these kind of culty like groups can end up like heading in this direction, because it's like, I'll do anything, I'll pay any amount of money, I'll give up my time, I'll give up my my family, my friends, I'll give up my material things to try to get my needs met from this individual. The other needs, the other need that kind of tends to come in with this is a personal power need. So again, what they're trying to use is they're trying to use this positioning from a value perspective to also create a power dynamic, where it's like, because they have the knowledge and these other people don't, that they have power over the other people. Now, again, if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, you will understand and know well that if you are trying to have power over somebody else, to try to get your personal power need met, one, you're not actually meeting your personal power need effectively at all, because your personal power is an internal thing that has no relation to the outside world. But two, because of the interconnectedness, because you're diminishing somebody else to try to have this power, you're trying to basically have power by the other people not having power. So you're basically costing their needs to try to meet yours. Interconnectedness, you're going to cost their needs, you're going to cost your needs. Everybody loses. But a lot of the time, people in these positions, they're not actually seeking fulfillment. They're seeking what they think is going to ultimately get their needs met, which is power, money, control. Those are the kind of things in those situations. So they're trying to influence, they're trying to manipulate, they're trying to verbally gaslight the people there, in order that it creates this dynamic of dependency, it creates this power over dynamic, it creates this value over dynamic, and this superiority dynamic. And if somebody is deliberately using word salad, now here's the thing. If you are deliberately trying to manipulate, influence, you're trying to gaslight the people who are there, the more intentionally you are trying to do that, the worse your needs will be compromised, because you are trying to compromise somebody else's needs. So it amplifies the impact. If you're doing it without knowing it, it's still going to negatively impact your needs. But if you are trying to do that, if you are deliberately, intentionally doing it at somebody else's cost, it amplifies the impact to them. It also amplifies the impact to your needs. So everybody loses as far as this is concerned.
Do you think that's why there's so many rich people who are so unhappy?
Probably.
Like, it just kind of, there's a lot. I know
yes,
that is a very layered and nuanced question, but it just kind of popped. Like, that was literally a thought that popped into my head. It's like, there's so many people who, like, you know, like, they grind for the money, like in ways that are knowingly negatively impacting people, but then the fulfillment of life seems like, it's like, I have all this money.
I wouldn't say that they grind for the money. There's a lot of people who make money at the cost of other people and their needs and their well-being. And because of the impact to the other person's needs, their needs are going to be negatively impacted. And like we've talked about this on previous podcasts, we were talking about the goal setting thing between happiness and fulfillment, and between goal setting and all that sort of thing. And the goal you think you want is not actually the one that you really want. If you haven't listened to those, go back and listen to those episodes, because there's some real value in those and some really important points that it's helpful for you to understand. So I think that the problem is that people think that money is the thing that's going to finally have them feel good enough, or power is going to have the thing that's going to have them finally feel good enough. Like, I don't feel good enough, but if I've got power, I'll finally feel enough. Really? Try again. Probably not. And I think that's the reason that there are a lot of rich people who are very unhappy. And I think that I don't think it's necessarily, if they are intentionally trying to compromise somebody else's needs to get their own needs met. I think there's two versions of it. There's the intentional side of things, and then there's the careless side of it. Like, I don't care if it impacts somebody else. And I am not only able and okay with that, I am intentionally going to do that. And I think that it just amplifies it to a whole another level. And what it does is it compromises the needs even further. And so they're even more unhappy. So they try and create more of the thing that they think is going to make them happy, which means that it works against them from the beginning. So I think in terms of word salad, is that why rich people are unhappy? Probably not, as a, like, in a nutshell. But is that whole, like, getting their needs met at the cost of somebody else's? Yeah, that's going to have a big part to play, definitely.
The other note that I made is I'm kind of like, do I, don't I? Because it's a subject. it's culty. So, like, and we both would love to just dive in, and we also,
yep.
yes, we've also maybe someday. Do you think with that second kind of word salad that you were just describing, the one that we find often in that kind of culty dynamic, like, what came to me is, if it made sense, would they have followers? When you, like, break down some of the culty dynamics, like, the word salad is what kind of keeps some of it together, because if, like, it actually made sense, people would be like, what the fuck am I involved in?
Well, the thing about it is I think that what happens is the word salad masks the true meaning of the group. And so I think that's the thing, is if you advertised a lot of these kind of cult-like groups, or groups that engage in cult-like dynamics, as what they actually are. Hey, would you like to join a group where we're going to compromise all of your needs to try to meet this one guy's needs at the top? Sign up now. Like, no, people are going to be like, fuck off, am I going to do that? But that's not what's being sold. What's being sold is often this that they're going to get some benefit from it. They're going to have power, they're going to have money, they're going to have enlightenment, they're going to have spiritual development, whatever it is that they believe they're going to get from being a part of this group. And the word salad is the thing that has them believing they're on that journey there, while not really having any clue what's going on, or feeling like they're actually making some real progress. And so, yeah, I think the word salad masks the true. And word salad is one tool that is used in these environments. Like, it is not the be all end all. There's a whole lot of other things. And at some point, I mean, if you're interested in this, we go into this in more in depth in the program. And I'm sure at some point we will get into this in the podcast a little bit deeper. As I said, it's one tool, but it is one of the tools that kind of it creates this veil where they're not really seeing the truth of what's under the, because like, even if it made sense, I mean, go back to what we just talked about in terms of the expert thing. If this person actually could do the thing that they said they would do, and they really wanted to position themselves as an expert and have other people be dependent on them, which would fuck them over because it would compromise their needs. Let's be clear on this. But if they really wanted to do that, you could make sense and do that. I could talk about need at a level that nobody would understand, to make myself look valuable and look important and look powerful, and have other people go, oh God, I must be around Claire. But that's not actually helpful for me, because if I'm doing that at the cost of somebody else's, my needs are being compromised too, which is why we do. It's why we do this. It's why we're trying to make this accessible. It's why we're trying to explain these things and explain needs dynamics in terms of these kind of everyday situations that people will experience, so that people can go, oh, because that's my point. My purpose is, how do we help as many people as possible with this? How do we help other people not get into the situations that you and I have been in the past? How do we avoid those? How do we heal from those? How do we create more of what it is that we want in our lives by understanding our needs and how to meet them for ourselves? But a lot of the time, that's not what the purpose is in those situations. So I said, like, if they actually could do the thing that they really could do, then they could just talk jargon and talk blah, 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 to try and make themselves look all high and mighty. As I said, it would bite them in the arse eventually, because they'd be meeting their need at the cost of somebody else's. But that's the irony of the word salad thing, is a lot of the time these people are experts in manipulation. They are not experts in the thing that they are professing to be experts in. Because if
That's
they
a
were,
resume line item for you.
they'd be doing something very different. Like if you really
Proficient
can
in
do the thing
word
that,
manipulation.
yeah. And there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them
Mhm.
out there. Like there's, I mean, if you look at it, like there was a area of study many years ago, and it's still active today, called NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, which was kind of built as an offshoot from the hypnosis industry. And the thing is that neuro linguistic programming is basically understanding how does the brain process information and helping, like, and the whole point of it. One of the points that you can, one of the benefits to doing this is if you understand the way the brain works, you can help people to kind of process information in a way that they're going to retain better. I actually have neuro-linguistic programming training. I don't really use it very often, but there are certain times where I'm like, I can see how if somebody's got a phobia, for example, there are some techniques you can use from neuro-linguistic programming to address a phobia. Now, that's generally speaking a good thing, like to help somebody with a phobia. The issue is that one of the things that is not really taught or emphasized at all when you do that training is the ethical side of things. And from our perspective, if you are being unethical in how you engage with NLP, you're meeting your needs at the cost of somebody else's, which means that you're actually compromising your own needs. So you end up screwed over as well. So I have a very, Serena knows, anyone who knows me well, I've got a very, very strong moral and ethical code as an individual. I think part of my Virgo moon, I'm like very high standards for myself. So like I have that anyway. But even if I didn't have that, like the safeguard is in what we teach. If I compromise somebody else to get my needs met, my needs are going to be compromised. So it's just zero point in doing it. But I think the problem is a lot of people have taken that NLP, those NLP tools, and figured out they can use them to manipulate and influence other people for their gain. And even sometimes they're doing it believing I'm doing the right thing, I'm helping people, da 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 da. But unless you've actually got your needs well met underneath the surface, so your unmet needs are not manipulating you to do things to manipulate other people to try to get your unmet needs met, or unless your needs are not met to such a standard where you have no need to manipulate anybody else, or you don't understand this whole, like, if I compromise somebody else's needs, it compromises mine, so there's zero point in me doing that. It's ending up causing this kind of ripple effect of damage because, and it's the reason that we are so, we could have released our program a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and there were plans to do it on numerable occasions. And then there are moments where we've got to that point where we're like, hold on a second. If we don't articulate this very carefully, it could be weaponized, or it could be people could use it against people without realizing that that's actually a real big issue for not only the other people, but for themselves. So it's the reason we've been responsible and taken the time that we have with it, because we understand these basic principles underneath the surface. We understand we don't want to meet our needs at the cost of anybody else's. If I use NLP, it's only because I can see that there's a little kind of mini like short circuit maybe happening in the brain. And if I can join those dots, that helps somebody get there a little bit quicker versus anything else. I'll use it in those moments. If I've got a client where there's trust and I understand that person's trauma and background and everything, I have the context to be able to do that. Other than that, it's not something, not the tool that I use, because for me, the more powerful tool is the needs, because once you have understanding of that, the self first and the needs ecosystem and other people, you're not going to inadvertently end up screwing yourself over by doing something that society is going, yeah, you need power. Yeah, you need money. And it doesn't matter what you do in order to get it. Hey, yay, capitalism. That ends up then compromising other people and then not compromising yourself in the long run. So I think that's the thing, is that if that's the reason that this is the tool that not only is it a tool that we've developed, but we've continued to develop it as we've kind of seen all that, oh, there's a gap over here, we need to fill that gap in. Oh, there's something we need to add here so that people understand this. Because for us, or for me, certainly in all the research I've done, I've not found a system, a tool, a methodology that is so robust and looks at the holistic viewpoint of how are we doing this, not just for ourselves, but also in conjunction with others and society around us. Anyone who add to that little bit before I get to the jargon?
Goes back to one word, which is interconnectedness. Like,
Absolutely.
and that's what it is. Like it needs to be part of your why. It needs to be part of your creation. Like it I think that's one of the most, especially the industries I came from, the interconnectedness piece is one of the biggest pieces for me that has really changed how I operate in life and business. And
it was missing in those industries.
It was very much missing in those industries. And it's also been more fulfilling for me to, like, where before it would have been like, oh, I got the bigger paycheck, I made the sale, like I would have been happy on that end. And I'm like, this feels good. Like I feel like, you know, I got what I needed out of a situation, they got what they needed, and like in that, like, no money can buy feeling in alignment with yourself. Like,
and no money is worth not feeling in alignment with yourself. Because when you can actually feel that alignment, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Nope. Not doing it.
And that's the hardest thing, is feeling that alignment, because I didn't realize, I thought I was in alignment with myself. I didn't realize how out of disalignment I was until I felt it. And I was like, oh God, I was feeling this and I didn't even know it. Like this was present. This like, it was in my being and I didn't even know it was there. And then once I got in alignment, I'm like, oh, actually it feels better not to charge more. Actually it feels, and it's situational and there's, you know, a lot of things, but I want to like stress the interconnectedness. Like,
absolutely. That's what it all comes down to. And like, whether you're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, if you are compromising the interconnectedness, you're compromising yourself. Period.
And I think checking in with it makes it so you can do it more intentionally. Like when I make a business decision, or when we make a business decision, like it's, how is this gonna, like, can this negatively impact somebody? And it's like, yes, okay, pivot.
Right. Well, and it's like, for a second, it sounded like you could use word salad more intentionally. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's a good idea ever. Like, no, no, I'm caught up with what you mean now. So the final piece of this is like very much adjacent to the thing that we were just talking about in terms of word salad, which is jargon. And the irony is, it makes sense that they're kind of in alignment, because if you don't understand what jargon is, jargon does sound like word salad. And I remember many, many years ago, like what feels like the kind of pinnacle representation of this was I worked as a project manager. I was managing special projects for a company. And we had an external supplier that was basically rebuilding the database for that our entire company ran on. And we had it was entertainment products industry company. And so we had the warehouse behind the scenes, which is where all the product was housed. And then we had the kind of more front of house side of things, which is where we had the sales department, the marketing department, and everybody uses database. And we had to make sure that the database was going to work in such a way that it met the needs of our warehouse staff, because they were the ones that were actually using the database more than anybody else. Yes, other people did to a certain extent, but they were the ones that were really utilizing it. And I will never forget, I was sat in this boardroom, and at one end of the table, I had the developers who were creating the database. And at the other end of the table, I had the warehouse staff. Now, the guy who was leading the database developers, I believe owned the company, I don't remember. This was one of those guys who tried to make himself look good by speaking jargon at every single possible opportunity. Like, he tried to make himself, again, that value need. He's trying to make his value need, doesn't feel good enough. And the only way he feels good enough is if he feels superior in value to somebody else. So it's like, if I'm talking stuff that you don't understand, therefore I have more value than you do. Compromising himself all the way, but we won't get into that right now. We can cover that. But also, it was a power play. It was his way of trying to hold the power in the room, because if he was the only one who understood what was being said, he had the power and everybody else didn't. And again, power over, trying to get his needs met at the cost of everybody else's. Now, he didn't realize this. I probably didn't even realize this time. I thought he was a bit of a dick, but I didn't really realize that's what was happening in the situation. I realized he was trying to make himself look good comparatively with everybody else, but I didn't realize the kind of needs lens aspect that was on at the time. It was much, much earlier on in my career. And I remember sat in the middle of this board table, and what would end up happening is the warehouse staff were like, we needed to do this, this, and this. Now, the irony was, even though they weren't speaking jargon, because the developer didn't understand the inner workings of our company, they were saying it needs to be this and this, and he didn't really understand. The irony was he didn't actually understand the warehouse speak because he didn't understand the way the business ran. So the warehouse would be like, we need this, 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 and this. So I would then turn around and in computer speak, say to the guy, okay, it needs to be able to do this, 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 and this. So then this guy would come back with jargon and be like, well, blah, 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 blah. So, and I'd look at the warehouse people and they would be like, blank expressions. I've no idea what he just said. So I would then translate the IT speak to the warehouse speak. And then they would respond and I would translate the warehouse speak to the IT speak and vice versa. Now, the difference is that the warehouse team, I don't believe, were intentionally trying to use jargon. They were just using the language that they used. It was like what they knew, and they didn't really know another way to describe it because that was the terminology that was used within the context of that business. The IT guy was absolutely trying to make himself look good by speaking in a way that nobody else understood. And it's exactly that same dynamic that we were just talking about. Trying to meet value need by compromising somebody else's value need. Trying to meet personal power need by meeting somebody else's need. Now, the interesting, by compromising somebody else's need. The interesting thing is, you want to be effective in IT. And I remember when I first, I worked in IT for a number of years. I don't think people believe it now. Like, who knows? IT to fairy gay mother. Who knew? That was a career progression that could happen. Exactly. And then some. And I was advised when I first did my degree by a guy in business. He said, don't just do an IT degree. People who know IT are 10 a penny. People who know business are 10 a penny. People who know both are rare. And that's where your value will come in. And I was like, well, and that's exactly what I did. I did a degree in business and IT. And I then went and I understood both worlds, which meant that because I understood both worlds, I acted as a translator and a hub between both worlds. Now, the interesting thing is, as a supplier, your objective is to deliver what the customer wants in the time frame for the budget. The only way you can do that is by understanding what the customer wants and ensuring the customer understands what you're telling them they're going to get. To verify, there was a many years ago. I'll see if I can find a link to it that's put in the show notes. There was a cartoon that was about like IT product development, and it was a tire swing or a rope swing. And it was basically a picture of what the customer asked for, a picture of what the analyst thought that they meant, a picture of what the analyst told the developer they wanted, a picture of and then it was like what the customer actually wanted and and they're all different. And so if the whole point is to get through the jargon, the benefit is to be able to speak in a way that everybody can understand. Like, my purpose here is to communicate the stuff that we're sharing today in a way that whoever you are, that you can understand what it is that we're saying. I mean, you may have a little challenge with the accent at times, but I try my best as far as that's concerned. But that's the whole point. But I think that people, because they have such chronically unmet value and personal power needs, they utilize these situations to try to get those needs met in a way that not only compromises their own needs anyway, because they're compromising somebody else's, but actually gets in the way of their business.
Mm-hmm. And they don't even
actually
realize
gets in the way of them getting more business and future projects and everything, did you say, without them realizing it?
It's interesting because I was having a conversation with somebody who's very high up in the school that we're attending right now. And it was a casual conversation. This wasn't part of a class or anything. And they were like, what's the one mistake most businesses make when it comes to customer service? And without blinking, I mean, and there's a lot of things I could have said. I was like, they don't listen to what the customer actually wants. And she just kind of looked at me and was like, oh. Took a moment and then said whatever they were going to say, but you could, like, it wasn't even a thought that could be a thing. And it's like, and in some aspects, it's like, listen to this conversation, because there are things here that you're not, you know what I mean? There's some areas that if you just listen to what the students were saying, you could make it an even better experience. Like, it's a great experience, like, make it even better and actually hear what your customers, your clients, your students, whoever it is, like, what do they need? What do they want? What are they asking for?
And that's actually the interesting thing is that what you said is they're not listening to what the customer actually wants. what's even better is when you can understand what the customer needs, even if it's not necessarily what they want, or they don't know that they need it. Because that's also the thing that used to, like when I used to do project management and like app development and that sort of thing, is that so often the customer wouldn't even necessarily know what they needed. So I would have to, like, one of the things I used to do is I would like, well, it could do this, it could do this. I'm understanding the way that their business works to be able to say, okay, well, what about this? What about this? What about, and half the time I remember people would be like, it could do that. I'm like, yes, it can. But they don't know that they want it because they don't know that that's even possible at that point, but they need it. And so if you understand the needs of your customer and you can meet needs they don't even realize they have, because you need your needs met before you can get to the wants. And sometimes you can get what you want, but if you try sometimes you might just get what you need.
It's
Thanks,
kind
mate.
of funny as keep going.
No, go on.
Okay. It's kind of funny because like that's anytime I've seen anybody, like whether we're doing a discovery session or just talking to people, they think they A, know what we do, B, think they know what they need help with. And it's one of my favorite things for somebody to be talking and, you know, one of the things that I've heard Claire do is somebody's talking about, oh, what do you do? Claire will do like what's going on in your world right now. And like in 30 seconds, they think it's XYZ. And all of a sudden, Claire just blows up. It's like, and this and this and this. And they're like, oh shit, I didn't even know that was a factor. I didn't know that existed. Like you said, I didn't know that was possible. And it's
right.
So thank you for that. Cause that word is,
it's important. And it's like,
important.
and it's like, it's not, and it's not a failing in the individual. Like you only know what you know. Like, and like when you start to talk about needs, people think at a very kind of superficial level, which makes sense because that's what most people's knowledge of needs is. Or if they're having a problem, they're focused on this relationship issue over here and it's like, this is the problem. It's like, actually, that's the symptom. The problem is the unmet needs that are underneath that symptom, but you wouldn't know that because nobody teaches us this. I mean, we're starting to now, obviously, but nobody has taught us this through life. So it's not a failing on the individual's part. And it's not like, I mean, yeah, there are countless discovery sessions that I've been in with clients where they come to me and it's like, I've got this issue. And what part of the discovery question is discovery session is I ask the question, what is it that you're looking for from me? What are you hoping that I would be able to do? How are you hoping I'd be able to help? And some people are like, I don't know. And I'm like, great, because chances are what you think and what I can actually do are probably a little different. So if you don't have an expectation, we can just go straight to how I think that I can help. But some people will come in. I had a client once who wanted me to help them make a decision and they wanted me to help them take action on that decision. And I was like, okay, based on the two options that you've given me and the two decisions that you have, like the choices that you're deciding between, you're not going to make a decision between those two things. And they were like, what? And I'm like, because one option meets needs, I don't know, 1, 2, and 5, and the other option meets needs 3, 4, and 6. And unless you have another way of getting those needs met, the unmet needs are going to keep pulling you back and forth between those two decisions, and you're not actually going to make a decision. I know you want a choice and accountability in terms of taking action, but how about I help you to remove the thing that's blocking you from making a choice and taking action, which is to understand your needs and how to meet them for yourself. Let's take them out of the equation. Let's neutralize the needs from this process so that you can then, and I said to her, I believe at that point, it'll be really easy for you to make a decision and you'll also be able to make progress. And at the end of she went through the program, we got to the end and I said, let's do a check-in session so we can see where you're at with the thing that you wanted help with. And we got to the session and she said, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I'm like, well, the two choices and making a decision and taking action. She went, oh yeah, as soon as I started meeting my needs, the choice is obvious. I made the choice of taking more action in 2 months than I have in the last 2 years. That wasn't what she wanted, but it was what she needed. And that's not me going, I know better than you. I just happen to have an expertise when it comes to needs. It means that I can sometimes see things that other people can't. And my job is to help like illuminate those things and help them to kind of start to make progress on them. And that's the thing, is that if your purpose when you are talking to someone, let's go back to the original point, like back to the word salad stuff. If your purpose is, I'm trying to help this person get where they need to be with the help and support that they need, you're going to have a very different dialogue. You're going to have a very different conversation than I need to convince this person to buy my product so I can get a sale. And that's what the word salad becomes a tool for getting someone to make the sale or getting someone to be dependent on them for their needs. So they hang around and give them all their stuff or what have you, versus what is right for me. I mean, I've had conversations with clients where I'm like, I don't think we're a good fit to work together. I've got some people I can recommend that might be worth you trying, but I'm not going to work with somebody if it's not a good fit, because that's not giving them what they need and the thing that's going to support them best. So it's like the reason that word salad comes in is because it's often a tool that is being used to mask how needs are being manipulated in a situation without us realizing it. So if you start to notice, and there is, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that somebody could sit there and talk particle physics at a PhD level, and I would be like, nope, I have no idea what you're saying. That's not because they're talking word salad. It's because I don't have the foundational understanding of these concepts to be able to understand. But if that's happening and they're trying to communicate something to you, it is their responsibility to be able to articulate it in a way that you can understand. And if they're not doing that, either they don't care about you understanding, or they may be trying to position themselves as more. I mean, as I said, that's a great example of that expertise thing where they actually have the expertise and they're just talking at such a level. I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm assuming you know what you're talking about and it sounds great, but there's no use or value to me whatsoever because I don't get it. And if you can't explain it in a way that I can get it, then chances are you're actually not that valuable to me, even if on the surface it appears like you are.
I think right there is a key statement. Like,
your value is what is your value to bring? If your value is to communicate something in a way that somebody can understand it and they don't understand it, you're not providing them value. A lot of the time you're providing them anxiety because you're giving them the fear that their needs are not met because they don't know the thing that you know, when in actual fact, if you're talking word salad, you may not know it either. It may just be something, an illusion that you're creating to make it seem like you know, in order to get them to invest in you, in your business, in your Culty group, in your sales process, whatever it is. And so it's like, if you're finding yourself in that situation where you're on the receiving end of it, ask yourself, where is the value here for me? What value do I need from this person? And if this person can't communicate in a way that you can understand, even if you think they know what you need to know, the chances are there's somebody else out there who actually can communicate it in a way that you can understand, that's where the real value lies.
And that's where the connection's really going to happen. The people you want to work with, like, you don't want to feel less than somebody. You don't like when you can connect on the same level, and especially when it's something where somebody has an expertise in it. Like,
well, and it's interesting. I had a session with a client yesterday, and one of the things that I was saying, and we've talked about this on previous podcasts, like I'm not better than anybody else because I know about needs. I just have different knowledge to somebody else. Like somebody else might be an excellent mechanic and I don't know anything about that. They've got value that I don't have. I've got and I don't mean as in value as a human being. Like they have valuable knowledge that I don't have, and I have valuable knowledge that they don't have. It's just different. But I think that that's the thing is that I was saying to a client yesterday, I'm the expert on needs. I'm the expert on human behavior. You're the expert on you. We have to combine those together to find the version of what I teach that's actually going to work for you, for your lifestyle, for your needs, for your wants, for your desires. And so often what ends up happening is that someone who positions themselves as an expert comes along and goes, I'm the expert. You have to do what I'm telling you to do. And the truth of the matter is, we were talking about it in the context yesterday about diet. Like some people go, this is the diet you have to have. Well, if you've got an allergy to that thing, it's not going to be helpful. Like that's not actually a helpful diet for you. It might be something with an exercise routine. And if you've got an injury, that means you can't do that exercise routine. That'll be at a detriment to you, not a benefit. So you need to be looking for, like when you are looking for experience experts and guidance and someone to help you with something, you need to make sure that person is as invested in your needs and your wants and your desires, and making sure that what they do works for you as in the other way around. Anything you want to add? And we've gone a little over today. But this is an important conversation because I think that we've covered a lot of things in here that I don't think we would have necessarily covered in other ways. So that's it for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. Between now and then, remember to stay safe, take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, if you notice somebody speaking word salad, remember that they're only really valuable to you if they can communicate in a way that you can understand.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.